One of the hardest questions to answer with comics is a very basic one. Where do I begin? With endless years of continuity and so many series to choose from, finding a starting point can be difficult, and that's where this series comes in. Each week I look at all the new comics coming out, pick out ongoing series starting new arcs, notable new number ones, and trade paperbacks and graphic novels being released. Then I finish things up by looking at my pick of the week, the thing I'm most excited about coming out this week. Let's start things off by looking at notable new number ones coming out this Wednesday. Each week when I start talking about notable new number ones, I try to start with the book that I think is going to be the biggest new release of that week. And this week, it has to be the biggest release, not only because the fact that this is Star Wars week, May the 4th be with you all, but it also has easily the longest title with Star Wars War of the Bounty Hunters Alpha number one. And man, that's a long title. And yes, this kicks off the big new summer Star Wars event that's happening. And I've been enjoying the Star Wars books. I'm not currently reading most of the main books, oddly enough, but the other High Republic books I've been really enjoying. I'm really debating about getting into this event. It's going to be focusing on Boba Fett and the frozen carbonite of Han Solo and the crazy adventures that he goes on to try to get Han Solo to Jabba the Hutt. It is weird when we kind of know what the end game is going to be. We know how it ends, but hey, maybe you can enjoy the journey along the ride. I mean, Boba Fett is pretty big right now, of course, because of The Mandalorian and all that. And also, one reason I'm excited about this is because it sees the return of Steve McNiven to the world of Star Wars. And I love the way he draws the Star Wars universe. I think the big reason the Star Wars books worked as well as they did when they first began is because of his art. And he's kind of semi-retired, I guess. I don't know. I feel like he's retired, but he comes back here and there. So anytime we get him doing a main book, I'm excited about it. I don't think he's going to be doing the entire series. He's doing the art for this book, and the preview pages alone are reason enough to pick this up. So Marvel kind of has two events launching. We have the Star Wars event, and I guess Heroes Reborn number one is also an event. I don't know where it qualifies in the event. Is it just a mini series? Where it's a smaller event. It's not as big as King in Black. I don't know what the deal is anymore, if I'm being honest with you. But Heroes Reborn, the general premise of it is a universe in which the Avengers never formed. What would that be like? And we get this book. This is written by Jason Aaron and it is coming out of the pages of his Avengers run. And I haven't really been keeping up with his Avengers run. I was with it when it first began for a while, but I just lost steam with it. And then based upon the majority of feedback I see regarding people who are reading it, doesn't seem like they're digging it a great deal. So I clearly made the best choice. Will this be welcoming to new readers? Do you need to read that? I don't necessarily think so. Again, this is like an alternate universe where other characters have risen up with the absence of the Avengers. So if you do like that, I tend to, but I do feel like Marvel has gone to this well a lot recently, like even with like the Infinity events that happened a few years ago. So it's a little dried up. Plus, we just got out of King in Black. I personally am not super interested in this. Nothing about it is all that appealing, but maybe, people will enjoy it and that'll change my mind and I'll go back and check it out. But as a first issue, I'm much more interested in the Star Wars event than I'm interested in this issue. For next to number one, we're going to go over to the world of Boom Comics for Eve number one, and this is written by Victor LaValle with art by Joe Leone. And Victor LaValle, the last series he worked on was the Destroyer series, which was a different take on the mythos of Frankenstein, which I actually really liked. I thought that was quite a good book. At least had some cool ideas. It didn't work, I think, in every facet, but I thought I enjoyed much more of it than I disliked. This is not a take on classic material. This is a brand new story, although it's hard to feel brand new when you're getting another book that is another dystopian future book. We are seeing a great amount of those as of late. This is in a world in which the ice caps have melted and Eve is our main character. Apparently she was in this some sort of virtual reality that people are surviving in as the rest of the world is desolate due to the ice caps melting, but she is awoken and has to go on this adventure to save her biological father. She's going to journey in this world, basically your road trip story, but in a world that's basically destroyed. So I not going to dismiss a book just because it fits into the dystopian future category. I know we do get a lot of those, but we had some good ones as well. I am a big believer in the fact that you don't dismiss something based upon concept. You look at it and how well it can execute an idea. So I'm hoping that this can be good. Like I mentioned, I did enjoy his last series and seeing what he can do with a new idea. It's been quite a while since he come out with a comic. Some of the preview images do look strong, and I do like this main character. When you have a young girl supposedly teaming up with some sort of teddy bear, You definitely get like kind of updated Wizard of Oz types of vibes in a way. I mean, a dark fantasy tale. We shall see. Maybe it can be something like We Live that I'll talk about later that I thought was quite good. It had a fairly similar setup, so we'll see how it goes. And at least it has an emotional core it can tie to when you have a daughter looking for her father or looking for a family. That at least gives you something to kind of prolong things, allow things to move forward because you have an end game intact that's not necessarily about saving the world, which is nice. So we shall see. I'm looking forward to see how this turns out. All right, let's move over to the world of Aftershock for Eden #1. And this is written by Cullen Bunn, who I feel like is one of those authors that writes so many comics. Every week I feel like I can talk about a new #1 written by Cullen Bunn. And this does seem like it could potentially fall into the horror realm. One thing about this book is it is 48 pages and it's a one-shot. So it's almost like a mini graphic novel in a way. And I do like the fact that Aftershock does this. They did it for a Zach Thompson comic, I think 2 years ago or a year ago, that I really liked. This one, though, again, it might fall into the horror realm. I'm not sure. My guess is it probably does. It's about this tattoo artist, Niles, who's a bit despondent in his life. He's having some difficulties. He's unsure about his future, but he meets up with this individual called Eden, who has some mystical characteristics about her. He ends up kind of falling in love, although she has some interesting aspects to her. The fact that like her tattoos can disappear after a few days. Is there some sort of magical element to her? That's unsure, but it seems like it'll be a book focused on love and admiration in some way in a more mystical sense, and again dealing with tattoos, so it'll probably look pretty cool as well. And I am a fan of having more one-shot comics like this. They don't happen a lot. I know people are hesitant just to pick up a book like this because you're not going to get a #2. It'll just be one and done. But like I said, the last time they did this, I thought it was quite a success, both in quality and execution. And my hope is that that'll continue. Again, Cullen Bunn is a pretty well-respected author, and he's done a lot of great things, and no reason to believe he'll not repeat that same success with this book. This week also begins a brand new Red Sonja series with the Invincible Red Sonja, written by Jimmy Palmiotti and also Amanda Connor, with art by Moriet. And Red Sonja is one of those characters that I did not really read before Mark Russell started his run. And again, these are creators I have a lot of interest in, that they have clearly done a lot of stuff for DC and Marvel and a lot of indie work as well. So this might get me interested in Red Sonja once again. So if you enjoyed the character, I know some people may dismiss Red Sonja as just like this sex symbol type of character that doesn't have much story there. But what I saw in the Mark Russell run is that you can actually really build out her world a great deal and make her into something very special. Maybe that'll be the case here. And I think this is going to be separate from the other, general Red Sonja book that's going on. So kind of cool seeing that we're going to get a new series with creators that can kind of do what they want, not have to focus on what was happening before. It worked well with the Mark Russell run, giving creators that have experience and a different voice the opportunity to express that. If that can happen again, maybe we'll have another successful run of the character of Red Sonja. The last new number we're going to talk about this week is Broken Souls Ballard, coming from the world of Scout Comics. And this is dealing with teenagers discovering that they have superpowers, but it's a little bit different than, say, your X-Men tale, as these teenagers are dealing with a lot of trauma, as their powers tend to be psychosomatic, dealing with some past issues, and that's why they're rooting up now. So it's just kind of making a very complex situation even more complex. And to add to that, there's a mysterious government organization also trying to track them down. So they have to deal with their personal issues and their personal struggles at the same time avoiding this secret organization that's trying to take them out now, knowing that there's individuals out there with unique abilities. Kind of clearly taking the framework that we've seen with something like the X-Men, but putting it in a new context with, I think, a more updated look at how these types of inabilities might impact someone on a psychological level, a type of issue that maybe is not addressed in your normal Marvel or DC comics. So that can be kind of cool. That's a cool thing about indie comics, when you can do something like that, take that concept and not necessarily deconstruct it, but rather add to it with a more modern sensibility. So we will see how that works out this upcoming Wednesday. Now that we talked about notable new #1s, let's look over to talk about ongoing series starting new arcs, starting with Die #16. And this week actually has a lot of ongoing series, especially indie books that are finally coming back Die, for example, I think has been off since November, but now we're getting a new issue focusing on this world. I'm also happy by the fact that we're getting an Image book that is getting up to numbers like 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, because I feel like that's a rarity anymore with Image books. You tend to see them end by 6, like 12 seems to be the max. So anything that goes beyond that, I'm glad we're getting more ongoing books like this. You can get more time to tell stories like this, especially when you have an author like Kieran Gillen, who loves to dive into this fantasy world. And Die is that. Is it a fantasy tale about a fantasy tale? The aesthetics of the world have always looked great. The art has been really fantastic at making this work look beautiful or dreary, whatever it may be. Sometimes I've had some issues with the storytelling, especially at the beginning, but I feel like those issues have really been limited as the series has continued, and I think these creators have become more comfortable with this world. Will this be an easy starting point? I'm not sure. I don't really think so, because this is a story that has been very deep in this lore. There's a lot here. This is a dense story, as often fantasy tales may be. So if you jump into this, will you understand everything that's going on? Considering the history that's involved, my guess would be no. You might at least understand the flavor of it and kind of enjoy the world. And if you do, you can go back and maybe check out the other issues and trade or what have you. But if you are a huge fantasy fan, if you love things like Lord of the Rings, if you are a huge, especially if you're a huge Dungeons and Dragons fan, this is super heavily influenced by that. I think you'd probably enjoy this book a great deal. One of Marvel's best books is coming back again with Strange Academy number 10. And as I look at Strange Academy, what I'm beginning to realize is this is written like an old school Marvel book in a way, where it almost feels like each issue in a way is a new arc or a new main topic, where you have a lot of B and C storylines that are kind of in the background that continue throughout the entire book. So it may not be a brand new starting point. The idea of this issue is that they're going on a field trip, probably dealing with some of the repercussions of last. But I do like how they can kind of maneuver all these storylines at once. It's very soap opera-esque in that way, very classic Marvel, where the B story can become the A story, it can go back to the C story. It just makes it feel like a coherent book, especially when you have a book like Strange Academy that has so many characters. I know that we had the Teen Titans Academy that has come out recently, and I don't think it's been nearly as good as Strange Academy for one major reason. With Strange Academy, we're seeing the world through the perspective of the kids, and it makes it more welcoming, and it makes this world, especially a magical world, feel more magical, because you're seeing their reaction to it rather than kind of the established characters like Doctor Strange in a way. And Roberto Ramos' art is as great as ever. Like, it fits this book to a T. And the fact that he's done every issue so far is extremely rare. I know it's been some time since we got the last issue, but I could not imagine this book without his cartooning. I think he's, especially a lot of the characters that he's created, seeing it in a different style, I do wonder if it would work just as well. So I'm happy to see this coming back. And if you ever wanted to take a trip back to those great days of going on school field trips, now you have the opportunity with this issue. After 2 long years, we finally see Babyteeth return this week, and it's been incredible, the fact that this is coming back. I get it, Donny Cates has been a bit busy in the world of Marvel, rewriting the world of Venom, King of Black, Absolute Carnage. He's had things to do. I kind of get it. So I didn't actually think we'd ever seen this book come out again, because who knows, he'd have the time to write it. But here we go, another new arc starting up for Babyteeth. But here we go, Babyteeth coming back with issue number 17. And this is a tale about taking the idea of the Antichrist child, the Damien story. But imagine if Damien was not born to some sort of erudite type of individual, but just your normal everyday teenage girl. What would happen? And what you see too is that it takes a lot of those tropes and rewrites them. And the biggest thing, though, it makes you actually kind of care about this kid. Like, he might be bringing ultimate destruction to the world, but you really want to see him connect with his mom. You really care about it. And as the story has developed, the mystery has been released more and more. Like, I haven't read every issue. I think I stopped around 11 or 12, but I really liked what I read. And I think this also shows a very different side to Donny Cates. With Marvel, you see the bigger, bolder ideas. This, rewriting the world of Venom, giving us something like Null. With Babyteeth, there are those big and bold ideas, but I think the character beats are what have made it work much more. I think he's much better at that with his indie books like Babyteeth or God Country. Although I'd say Thor may be up there too, because I do think he's been able to approach that. So if you are a huge Donny Cates fan, you've been liking what he's doing, I think you may not get the same type of stories you've been used to with his Marvel stuff, but I think you'll see a different side of him as a writer. And you may definitely enjoy this. Again, not necessarily the book you probably want to start with when we go back to issue number 1, but who knows? Again, I am currently out of this. I'm going to try to jump in with this issue, see how well I can do, and I'll report back hopefully very shortly. The last ongoing series starting a new arc is Inkblot with issue number 8. And Inkblot is kind of akin to something like Ha Ha or that of Ice Cream Man, with each issue being its own thing, although it's not a pure anthology series, because you do see some continuing bits from issue to issue, mostly focused on this cat, and a cute cat nonetheless, who tends to cause a lot of problems because he's a magical dimension hopping cat. And that's where the story comes in. We go to different dimensions, and each dimension we have a little tale, and by the end, things tend to be solved. And one of the issues I have had with it, I've enjoyed the progress of this story. I think it's been getting stronger and stronger as it's come out. These are creators that are relatively new to the world of comics, and that has been fun seeing their journey. The one problem, though, is that it's becoming a bit formulaic in a way, so I do wonder, could this issue change that? Apparently, based upon their letter in the back from the last issue, that all these issues will tie into something somehow, when or where. I'm not necessarily certain. My guess is pretty soon. I don't think this will probably go beyond 12 issues, although I didn't think it'd get up to 8 issues, so who knows. I do think, though, each issue has been very welcoming to new readers. Like last issue, issue number 7, if you never read anything that came before, it really wouldn't matter. You had everything you needed there. My assumption will be that'll be the same case for this issue. So if you're just looking for something new, if you want to get into the ground floor of new creators to see what their new careers may lay ahead, to get those creators that you can kind of latch onto and stick with and watch them progress throughout the medium, I think that's a perfect opportunity with something like Inkblot. With Relive trade paperback, and this comes from the world of Aftershock Comics. I really enjoyed this book. It came out last year and this year, and I mentioned with Eve how I'm not going to dismiss that book simply because it's a dystopian future book, and the reason being is We Live is also a dystopian future book, but I really, really liked it. Why is that? It actually shares a lot of similarities with Eve, because it is similar, a journey of kids trying to survive a world that is just determined to destroy them in a way. And that journey, though, with We Live was just emotionally strong from beginning to end. He really began to care about all the different characters. There's also just a lot of creative energy throughout the book. The way that it designed its dystopian future world, it didn't feel like it was the same thing we see all the time. Like oh look, there's another monument that's been destroyed. Everything else is destroyed, but we see the relics of this classic monument. Just the characters and the creatures. It was a lot of fun, despite the fact that it was kind of scary at the same time. It was a good meshing of tone, and if Eve can continue that will be great. But if you did miss out on this book and you wanted to check it out, maybe because you dismissed it because, again, it's another dystopian future book, and I do think the book kind of got crazy with speculators, because speculators be speculating. So if you want to buy it to read the book, you can do so now in trade paperback form this upcoming Wednesday. Also coming out from Boom Studios this week is We Only Find Them When They're Dead, which is written by Al Ewing. And Al Ewing, of course, is getting a lot of notoriety for the work he did on Immortal Hulk. And I went into You Only Find Them with the Dead with a lot of expectations. And I'll be honest, this was a book that really did not work for me. I kind of gave up on it by the 3rd or 4th issue. It just wasn't necessarily working. I do wonder if it will read better in trade, though, because my biggest issue with it is I felt like it lacked coherency, and I thought the characters felt a bit thin, and I never really understood ultimately what the story was about. What was it progressing? Like, I saw the ideas, I saw the concept, I saw the scale of the fact that this was about a world where they find these gods, and when they find them, they're already dead, and they kind of mine them. They become this kind of space resource in a way. That's kind of a cool idea. I liked the different sequences they used to show how they did that. But I felt when I went a little bit deeper, it wasn't quite there. Maybe in trade, though, it'll be a better read, because you can see those ideas kind of all in one volume. So I might give it another shot. I'm curious for those that maybe have been continuing with it. Did you love it throughout? Did you feel like it got better as it went on? Maybe I should go back and I'll enjoy it more in trade, because I know there was differentiating of opinion on this book, and a lot of people did really like it. I saw a lot of praise for it, but for me, for what I look for in books, I didn't like it in issue format. But again, sometimes you do have those books that they just are not always great written in that format, and when you get it in trade and you can see it all in one sitting, and ends up being a much more enjoyable experience. So we'll see if that's the case with We Only Find Them With Their Dead, as the first volume is being released. Holy crossover, Batman. I'm sorry, I really shouldn't have gone there, but hey, what are you gonna do? I say that because Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #3 comes out. Yes, we have 3 different installments of this crossover series, which has been fun. It is very much a 90s kids stream come to life. I did grow up at the time when the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic and cartoon was as big as ever, and obviously the 90s Batman cartoon, which really redefined what it can do with an animated series, was great as well. So now seeing these two worlds combined was a lot of fun. And I read a few issues of this series, and I thought what was really cool is how it expanded the idea of crossovers in some fun ways. It's it's not your high thinking novel or anything like that. It's very much what it is. And I thought this is written by James Tynion, who is of course doing the current Batman run. And although I don't love everything Tynion has done with Batman, I do have to give him credit as a writer, because he does, I think, do something that not many Batman writers can do, and give you different flavors for the character. Like his detective run is much different than his current Batman run, which is much different than this book. That's a hard thing to do. Like, I love Tom King's run of Batman. I know, don't hate me, at least the majority of it. But when I read a Tom King book, I usually know I'm reading a Tom King book for the most part. I think with Tynion, his voice is not necessarily, you maybe say as strong, but there's a little bit more versatility there. So I would say that, because if you're not loving the current Batman run and you're seeing Tynion is on this, and you're like, oh, I'm not going to like that, I wouldn't say that's necessarily the case. I think this book, he first started this series before I think he was even on Detective. Maybe it's around the same time. And he's really stuck with it. And I think infused a lot of creative ideas with it. And not just, you took it as a paycheck, something that is just taking the namesake, knowing you're going to get two properties people love coming together, and that's enough. It's actually been kind of fun too. It's, again, not your high thinking art, but it is very much effective at what it's accomplishing and what it sets out to do. One of today's most accomplished cartoonists, Alison Bechdel, is also coming out with a new book this week, a new graphic memoir, The Secret to Superhuman Strength. And no, this is not a recipe of how to make the superhero serum from the Captain America comic, but rather a graphic memoir about her life and how she's approached this idea of physical and mental health. And knowing it's a graphic memoir, I'm guessing this is not going to just be a cavalcade of health tips, but something a little bit deeper. Just looking at her past work, you would assume that, because she's really shown how she's able to weave really strong and layered tales in her past work. She may not be the Donny Cates compared to a lot of people, but if you look at how critically acclaimed her work is, like, this is a type of book that has a chance to be one of the potentially the most acclaimed books of the year if it can maintain the quality of the past books. So if you want to get in on the groundwood floor, if you want to read something that's a little bit different than your superhero genre, this will be coming out. And I mentioned a lot with my Graphic Thoughts videos how graphic memoirs are my favorite genre, because I feel like they give you an avenue that really you can't get with any other medium, especially when you have an artist and writer doing the same book. It's one unique perspective, and that's the case with this. So this is probably one of the books I'm most excited about coming out this week. Penny is also a graphic memoir, which is written and drawn by Carl Stevens, although I don't think it's a memoir of his life, but rather the cat Penny. And I don't want to get, like, how can you necessarily make an entire book about the life of a cat? I've seen it done before with a dog. Actually, one of the better books from last decade was this graphic memoir that was told through the perspective of a dog, and it's crazy, but it can be a clever experience if done right. So, and I do wonder, what would a cat see in this world? So I think this is one of those things that could be like awful. It could be very gimmicky, but if it's done right with the right sense of humor and the right sense of creativity, it could be one of those reads that's unlike anything else. So just the idea of doing a graphic memoir focused on a cat, it does feel like it's perfectly made for the world of the internet that does love their cat videos. And if you ever saw a cat video and thought, what does a cat actually think about this video? What is their perspective on life? Now you have the opportunity to actually know that with this comic. The last graphic novel we're going to talk about this week is Brandon Sanderson's Dark One, and this comes from Vault Comics, and this is something that I don't know if they've ever done before, to be honest. I've read a lot of Vault stuff, the majority of it, but not everything. So it does have me excited that they are making a choice to put out a book in graphic novel format, because I know it's not an easy choice. Graphic novels can be a hard sell, especially when it doesn't have a major name attached. Like, you can throw Neil Gaiman on a book and it probably will sell, at nearly double what a normal graphic novel will be for a publisher like vault that is clearly not the same size as something like Image, with creators that are relatively new. Like, I don't really know these creators all that well. And Brandon Sanderson's story, which I've not read personally, so I don't know, how much this is adapting really a famous story. I'm coming into this as a huge novice. I do know the story is about a young boy who has visions of the future, and it seems like they're visions of destruction, of a world that's being destroyed. And what he soon discovers that these visions are not dreams, but actually a look into a possible future where he ends up being a destroyer of this world. So he has to wrestle with the idea of being a destroyer or potentially being the savior, and how that evolves. And that is intriguing. And again, one of the reasons I'm most intrigued is because, again, this comes from Vault Comics, who I trust as much as I trust any other publisher out there. And the fact that they're making this choice to put it out in graphic novel format is, I don't think, a choice they probably took lightly, and feel like they probably think it's a choice that will be a better creative choice and a better choice for the reader. So that has me excited. And I think when you have publishers that make choices like that, that maybe would hurt their bottom line a little bit, I think they should be rewarded in a way, especially for something like comics where the margin for error is extremely limited. So if you've enjoyed past Vault Comics, there's been a lot of stuff out there, Wasted Space, Witchblood, which came out recently. They have a whole lot of different comics. I want to read something new, especially if you enjoyed fantasy tales, especially if you're a person who enjoyed past Vault Comics. Maybe give this one a shot, especially if you're not a person who reads a lot of original graphic novels. This might be a great way to kind of dip your toe into that world and give it a try. All right, we talked about new series, we talked about ongoing series starting new arcs, trades, and graphic novels. Now it's time to talk about the thing I'm most excited about, my pick of the week. This was a week where picking out my pick of the week was quite difficult, where last week it was quite easy. I knew exactly right away what my pick of the week was going to be because we had an Brubaker Baker, Sean Phillips book, so there you go. This week, I had to dive just a little deeper as I looked at this book and I realized, like, wow, this is hitting so many of my sensibilities with comics I like to read. There's a historical aspect. It's from creators that have enjoyed their work in the past, and it's from my favorite genre, crime noir. All that makes me really excited for The Good Asian #1. And this comes from the writer of the Infidel series that came out a few years ago from Image Comics, which is a powerful horror tale that also talked about the plight of Middle Eastern immigrants and Muslim Americans as well. And then The Artist from Outpoint Zero, which was a pretty good looking book as well. So what this, though, it takes place during 1936 in the United States, and it is heavily focused on the plight of Asian Americans, specifically Chinese immigrants. And this is something that we really don't talk about at all in a way. We, of course, talk about Japanese internment camps in the 40s, which we should very much still do. But this is a part in this, a time where we kind of overlook just how hated and the prosecution that went on against Chinese immigrants during the mid and early 30s. And I think it's coming out, I don't say perfect time, it's serendipitous, unfortunately. It's by the fact that we're seeing so much rise in hate crimes to Asian Americans, especially Chinese Americans, due to COVID reactions and just the hate that's coming out from individuals. And I think this is not going to necessarily directly speak to that, but I think it's directly speaking to an issue that has been unfortunately overlooked for some time. The plight of the Asian American, especially the Asian American immigrant, and the challenges that they face, all inside a neo-noir tale. So it's just a cavalcade of reasons why this can be an important comic. And I don't think this is going to directly talk about COVID reactions per se, but it will show you just like the dark history that's been there for some time that we don't talk about nearly enough. And if you've ever watched my history through comic book videos, I do like to talk about that. Just not necessarily all the bad things, but elements of history and how comics can kind of shine lights on parts of our world, parts of our time that we don't talk about nearly enough. And this is exactly what this book could do. So there's, I think, a lot of pressure or a lot of different pieces outside of just reading a comic book story that have me interested in this. So it's a big reason I want to check it out. I think there's a lot of potential here to do something that is unlike any of the other books that we talked about this week. Anyways, those are all the books I wanted to talk about this week. Thank you for taking the time to check out this video. Let me know what you're excited about this new comic book day, what you'll be picking up in the comment section below. Just remember that comics are for everyone. The key is finding the right one. Until next time, keep reading.